I have Revit open as a new document, and I've started Dynamo by going to Manage and selecting the Dynamo icon and starting a new document there also. So I'm on the site plan, or actually level 1 it looks like here, of our Revit document, and I'm going to create a property line. This is one of the few things we're going to do actually inside of Revit. We're going to spend a lot of time inside of Dynamo, but I went under Massing and Site, and I'm going to grab the property line tool. And that's going to ask me if I want to create by sketching or distance, and I'm going to do it by sketching. And we're just going to make a rectangle that's going to be 200 by 400 feet. And I'll just stretch this out and see what we get here. It'll all fit on the screen. Let me just try to just catch this. There we go. And I'll click complete on that. And I can select that. I'll just center it there on the on our elevation ticks. Okay, so what we want to do now is really use Dynamo, but we need to bring that information of that property line into Dynamo. So I'll use this navigation tool of all of the definitions over here. And I'm in Revit, and I'm going to go to Selections, and I'm going to look for a way to bring that selection in. And it turns out that there is a Select Model element. So I'm going to select that and click on it. And actually right away we'll go ahead and I'll click Select. And then I'll come in here and roll over this, but I'm not going to select it. I'm going to hit Tab until I get the whole thing. And then I'll click that. And now I have that element selected. And it says, actually, if we roll down here, it says property line. Now, we don't really need to look at Revit much longer until we go back to building. So I'm going to open up the screen for Dynamo completely. So now that we have that model element, it's just an element. Dynamo doesn't really know what to do with it. And so what I want to do is make it visual on the screen. So I'm going to turn it into a curve, and I'll do the shortcut for that. I'm just going to type element, because this would be a hard one to find, and then dot curves probably. And so the input is element, and the output is a curve. And you know, sometimes it might be interesting just to roll down and see what the other ones do. Converted curve from an element. So what we want is the first definition. We'll go ahead and import that element in here. And right away you'll see that property line showing up. And it looks like it's floating up in space, but that's just because it's larger than the grid that we've created. Now if you hit the escape key, you can actually work this, navigate through the visuals of the 3D preview. And then if you let up off the escape key, it'll come back to the node-based definition for you. So now we have that element curves in. One of the things I'd like to do is actually, we have to first advance it. It's a bunch of lines right now, and we need to get it into a polyline. So I'm going to join that. So I'm going to do polyline. Polycurve. Polycurve, and it is really to get by join curves. And the idea there is it's almost like flattening a list. It takes a bunch of segments that are joined to each other and then makes them into a solid curve or a polycurve. And I'll turn the preview off of this one because we're going to keep wanting those things to disappear. I'm on automatic run for now because I'm really not doing anything too complex. And so we have that output of a solid polycurve. And just to help us kind of identify it when we're moving ahead, I'd like to give that polycurve a color to it. So we can actually color lines, and I'm going to do geometry color. All right, and I get to put in the geometry and the color, and I need a color, so I'm going to do color. And then there's by ARGB, that's the transparency, the red and the green and the blue, or the alpha channel should I say. And I'll plug the color in. Right now it's probably just gray. I'll plug the polycurve in, and I'm going to actually just turn this one off. And we're still seeing that polycurve. You can see when I click on the node for geometry by color. And so let's just see what these are. These are all defaulting at 0 value. but they tell you that the value needs between 0 and 255. So let's do a number. And I'll do 256 minus 1 would be 255, right? Is that what it was? 255? Yes. And that's because we're starting at 0. And I'll plug that into red. And now our property line is red. There's one other thing we need to do, and this is just to get us to where we're going to be able to use our generative design tool, is to remember this poly curve when we go through a bunch of reiterations. And so this is cryptic. I don't really expect you to, we never know this in a million years unless you've gone through an exercise with it. You need to do data remember. And I don't know if it's data.remember. And that says store data passing through this node to the Dynamo file. So that helps us later on to retain all the information we need to go through our generative design. So I'll plug that into the data remember, and then I'll plug that into the geometry. And so now we have the property line set. And the next thing we'll look at is actually defining this as a UV space.